he could be. There was always a line of perspective that my mom taught us about why he was gone. And so I think from that, we sensed a lot of pride and a lot of team as a family as we supported him in his career. And that has definitely pulled forward, not only in my own marriage, but how I parent my kids, especially in times of separation. So I think that there's always going to be a human response with emotion and feelings that you need to parent through. But there's also a time where you are going to paint their perspective, and that's going to be their reality and how they move forward. So there's always these trite, common phrases that we like to throw out at military kids, like resilience and you're great. And I think those are nice, but they also come. It doesn't mean that there's not a hardship or a possible negative impact on their mental health. And I think that my parents were really great examples of creative communication, not only to each other, but also what my mom had to do as a solo parent often, and how she communicated to us about the whys, why it looked like this, why our family structure was different, why my dad was gone. And it created a lot of pride. But also I think each one, like myself and my brothers, we are who we are because of that. Never not she They allowed us to express emotion, but we picked ourselves up and we were part of the team. And your dad's doing something respectful, but so is our mom too. So yeah, I owe them a lot. As we continue, my husband and I have 3 kids. He's been in for almost 16 years in the summer. And so when it's his time to go, when he's in the field, when he's deployed, I can pull from that. I can pull from that not only experience, but good examples that my parents gave us. So I do not know if we'd be where we were if it weren't for some of the things that I was exposed to as a kid, for sure.
And like, how, when you were growing up, like how did you communicate with your dad, like at home versus like when he was away? Like, were there letters? Did we like phone calls, like things like that?
I would say very, very sparse and sporadic communication. So you have to remember, like, no internet. I remember somewhere along his like battalion command time, AOL was big and came on the scene, and so we got an email, but that wasn't for us to communicate with him. I don't even believe that Army emails were at the height of where they are today. So it might have been a phone call. If that phone call did exist, it was very inconsistent as well as short. Letters might have happened, but we relied on probably my mom giving us communication and what little interaction she had with him. But that was good enough. That was good enough, and we marched on, and we were fine for it. So I not compared to what my kids have, especially during like a deployment time, it's not even comparable. Like, yeah, I mean, I tell my kids all the time, like, this is so cool. You have technology to drop in or DM or text messaging, social media, Zoom, FaceTime, all that just was not there.
Yeah.
So trying to bounce back to the beginning here. So my editor gave me the idea of, how communication has changed for, she wanted something for Women's History Month. And I explained to her, I was like, every article that you think could have already been written has been written about famous military spouses, things like that. And so when she pitched communication, I know, like, we know that in the past, 10 years, 20 years, it's going on, that we have the internet, we have text, we have so much more now. But like, I also wanted to explore, I think you saw like the third question there, like not just like the means of communication, but like the military's attention to like ways of communication as well. So, So I start with the basics. Julie, I know you were a military spouse for, I believe, 38 years. Could you give me like a rough time frame of?
Yeah, I was a military spouse from June of 1978. Got married the day before my husband, Missy's dad, commissioned, and until January of 2016 when he retired. So yeah, lots of changes in communication in 38 years, 37 and a half, 38 years. Mhm.
So can you kind of like, what was it like in 78? And I mean, we have a pretty good idea of what it was like in 2016, but maybe,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
how did those changes, like what changes occurred? And then like, what impacted those changes have?
Okay, well, I mean, the basics were letter writing, naturally, lots of letters. Our first duty station was Germany. And well, let me back up. Even back in 1978, when you were, we were at the basic course at Fort Benning, and phone calls were, everything was a landline, of course, and it was long distance, like to call your parents or a friend. And so you waited till like Sundays when the rates were the cheapest. You planned your long distance phone calls, unless of course it was an emergency, around the weekend rates. And so that's real different now. But and then letter writing, we get to Germany, and we lived on the economy, and we didn't live in housing because the wait was so long. And we didn't even get an actual phone in our apartment for 6 months. It just took that long. It was a new apartment. It was in a German person's house, and because it was a new installment, it took 6 months. So, so that was, that was a little different. If like one thing that I think about how it's changed now, like I had 2 babies in Germany, and like the hospital I was in, it was American hospital, but we didn't have phones in the room. If you needed to make a phone call, you had to go to the nurse's station and call. You just didn't have access to instant communication. If you needed to, like there was a couple of times, in the hospital, I needed to get in touch with my husband because there, an emergency had arisen, and it was the OIC, the officer in charge, that called him, it wasn't me. It was because I didn't have access to a phone, so I was, let's see, is that kind of what you're
Yeah, like that's the kind of
about?
is
Okay.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I can't imagine, like my husband's the OIC right now, and I
Yeah.
literally like had texted him like, what do you want for dinner?
No. I mean, this was like, an emergency with the newborn, and my husband was at work. He was at his office, and again, that was for the days where the service member got maternity leave. He was at work. Emergency came up with the newborn, and it was getting transferred to the children's hospital for intensive care. And it was the hospital that called. I mean, it wasn't me. I had no access to a phone. And then I remember in that dang leaf blower. Can y'all hear it? I'm sorry. I can't believe they showed up right now. But in 1983, he deployed to the Middle East for 6 months. And that was our first long, separation, 1983. And I had two little, Julianne wasn't even born yet. I had 2 little guys. They were like maybe 8, a year and 2 years old, something like that. And the way the phone calls, I don't even know if you call it a phone call. It was called like a satellite phone call. Mm-hmm. And what, like he would I think they called it patch into your home station. And so we were at Fort Campbell. And so they would patch in the tactical satellite phone to Fort Campbell, and then Fort Campbell would call me. And then, so there was this middle person that was controlling so basically, like, this is an example. Oh, hi, it's snowing today, over. And then, yeah, so there was someone listening, and I would always you'd say over, and then you'd wait a few seconds, there would be a delay. And then my husband, would make a comment, and he would say over, and then they would, pat. So it's called a tactical satellite phone. So this is kind of a funny story, because my little guys, my little boys, never saw their dad on video, or we had purchased those Kodak instant cameras, where you take a picture instantly, and that was our fast way of doing pictures. But so when he got home after 6 months, the first night home, my one that was about 18 months by then, getting close to 2, had done something, he had really misbehaved, and my husband, thought, was like, well, this isn't good. And he scolded him. And my son looked at me and he said, that man is mean to me. He didn't even know it was his father. He called him that man.
Yeah.
So, when he just had no memory of him, and there had not been any kind of visual connection during those 6 months. So, that's different. That's different now. Thank goodness. So, I don't want to hog the.
Oh no, this is like absolutely fascinating.
Bizarre.
Bizarre is definitely another word.
Yeah.
So, Julianne, if you want to kind of like chime in there, I know nowadays they have daddy dolls and things like that. Have you used some of those things for when, dad's gone? And
yeah, definitely. I think my mom hit the nail on the head. Like, one of the big differences for us is that video connection and a visual connection. So my kids have done a deployment when they were much younger, and I feel like that that resource or that development in communication was quite vital to them. My daughter knew who he was when he got off a plane. And I don't necessarily have a recollection of that as a kid, but I know that seeing the difference in my kids and seeing the impact that it had, I can't imagine. But one thing I did want to bring up, one thing that I do remember is when emails became on the scene, my mom got trained in typing emails during a deployment. And so she can probably talk better to this, but I remember as a kid going to the battalion headquarters, and I would just sit on the floor, and my mom would receive either typed or handwritten notes from other spouses with the intent of that getting to the soldier. And my mom was trained to type it out.
Yeah. And you did it at ACS.
Yeah.
We didn't have email on our computers. And that was that was in 1994 when my husband's battalion went to Haiti. They deployed to Haiti. And so, if you wanted to communicate with your spouse, you took, they asked for people to be trained in email, and you took the message you wanted to send to your spouse to ACS, and that's where it got emailed. And we thought that was so, high tech. And,
yeah.
I mean, for 1994, it was.
Yeah. It really was.
I thought that was so fancy.
I know. And another thing about communication, not just between the spouses, but when I became a military spouse in 78, the biggest form of communication we had, within the unit, was phone trees. that's how we sent messages or communicated things. And coffee groups were another way that we got information out about, the training schedule or the, what was coming up, or but the phone tree was huge. And that was our link. So to communicate. So within the unit. And I don't like when he went to the Middle East in '83. I remember there was a rear detachment guy, but there was no FRG. There was no where you met and got updated with information. That didn't really come about until Desert Storm. And they were originally called they're originally called FSG, Family Support Groups, and they weren't real. They were just kind of left up to the discretion of how the unit wanted to do it, and it was. The Army learned so much about family readiness and support and communication during Desert Storm, that it was after that FRGs became an Army. They became the commander's program, and they changed it. They didn't want the perception. They thought FSG took on the wrong perception. They wanted to empower spouses to be more self-sufficient, sort of, and not just, hey, take care of me, that kind of thing. And then programs started to become more more professional. And then we saw it during Iraq and Afghanistan. Missy can talk about that, because she was very involved with with and then like AFTB and then Fergus and MCLEX. I mean all these.
Yeah.
The Army finally got it. And I want to do this quote from my husband. He said, okay, like when in '78, when I came in, and for quite a few years, it was a male dominated culture. The military was very male dominated. And these are my husband's words. He said, no one understood back then the connection between strong families and operational readiness.
Yeah.
And things started to change after Desert Storm, the best I remember.
Yeah. I mean, you entered the Army where you were required to volunteer. That was on ours. Yeah. It was a requirement. Of course, we were in Germany the first 3 years, and we had to sign up. We had to sign up to volunteer at the thrift store, the Red Cross, the ACS. It was a requirement, and I mean, I just can't believe that this was true, but it was. But your husband's evaluation, his OER, if the wife wasn't meeting her expectation or a standard, it was mentioned in the OER. It reflected in the OER. Yeah.
And my husband didn't believe me when I was asking, because I am not a joiner. I will make gift baskets. But I'm just not a people person. And I'm as I said, he's recently just taken company command. And I'm look, I can show up if need be. I'm you don't understand, people that used to show up on OERs. And he was really? And I'm
yes.
my aunt aunt was a spouse in during Vietnam, and
Mhm.
she asked me, she's like, well, when do you get your check? Because she like, that was that far back where the housing went to her, and I'm like, oh no, they don't do that
Oh, yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
Like,
Right,
like
right.
they don't
right.
they don't send me a separate check. I might volunteer if they actually did.
I can remember when this was before direct deposit, and you had payday, uh, and and the soldiers. I mean, you literally, lined up. You wore your class A's, I think is what they were called then, and you lined up, and you had a payday officer, and and you would get your money. That you would get you would get paid, and you would. I can remember like my husband bringing home like his LES, and there would be like any kind of like information or something upcoming. It'd be stapled to the LES. Yeah, yeah. hmm And that's, yeah, that was, yeah, before direct deposit. I mean, now that was in Germany where you lined up and got paid, and maybe that was, I don't know, maybe that was just unique to Germany, because you could also, get money changed into, at that time it was Deutschmarks. It wasn't, whatever they call it now. Back then it was Deutschmarks. But yeah. So, and it was, I mean, nothing happened on payday except it was called payday activities. And because that was the day that people were given to, pay their bills and pay, so it was, yeah, it was, and the LES came home with your husband.
So going back to, going back to what you're saying about like how everything seemed to change, like beginning with Desert Storm, and Julianne, I kind of want you to chime in here too. So nowadays we have things such as like the 5 love languages, military edition. They have weekend long marriage retreats. That if anything at the base level is, go talk to, the chaplain is available 24/7. So, in what ways do you feel like the military or the army in general started supporting, supporting and respect? I don't know if respect is the right word, but like the marriage aspect of it.
No, I think it's fair to use the word respect, because I think it kind of goes back to the quote that my dad gave. There is a connection there between what's going on in the home, what's going on with the kids, what's going on with the marriage, and how that soldier can operate like out in the field or during a deployment. And I think it took the Army quite a while to realize that. Sorry, here you go. It's a pacifier. And when we did see change with the amount of resources. But I think when I was a kid and my mom, probably in the early part of her marriage, I think it's safe to say it didn't exist at all. Resources were not there. Even resources for kids were not there. So I think it was like my first taste of like youth sports was probably down the road, and that was a big deal. But I mean, nowadays kids can receive counseling. That's advocated for. You have it in your schools. You have a school liaison. You have influx for kids as well. You have awareness, and you have a path towards kind of breaking that stigma. I think the fact that I currently have resources equates to the fact that they realize that connection and they do respect it. And I think before it was just a soldier's army, and the family was not a part of it. You have had great change, and you've had it in the right direction. I still think we've got a ways to go. I do think we're on the right path, but as a child and then watching their marriage, slim to none resources, and also a stigma around resources too, and a disconnect between this is the soldier and his job, and the family's over here. So those would be my perspective on it. And I feel like comparing and contrasting that to where I am now, I'm extremely grateful. Like if there is a need, there is probably a resource. If I don't have that resource, I might just not be aware of it. It's for me and this state of the Army, I just might not have the knowledge of what's available, but there's a great chance that it's out there.
Yeah. When we were in Germany, we had 2 very tragic things happen, deaths in our personal life. And I, I asked my husband, I said, did your commander ever come up to you and say, do you need to talk to somebody? I mean, these were like back-to-back, deaths in our child and his father. Or did a chaplain approach you? Anything? And he said, no. It was like you just deal with it. There was
And you
no,
go back to work.
yeah, it was
You
like,
deal with it by going back to yeah.
it was just, back to work and,
Mhm.
and deal with it the best you knew how. But yeah, there was no, offering of any kind of help or, mental health or counseling, grief counseling, anything like that. No. So.
And when did, as somebody who went through it in the late 70s, 80s, 90s, into the early aughts, like when did you start hearing about like, oh, hey, your spouse is getting back from this 9-month tour of duty, how can we help you like nowadays they have like reintegration training and, they're like, hey, you can talk to a counselor for free for 12 weeks to, figure out, find your spark or, little like key phrases.
Probably, I would say, a little bit after Desert Storm in the mid 90s, a little bit, but really, I don't remember any kind of formal, reintegration type exercises or information. I mean, I would say until until the war on terror. Help me. I don't. Gosh, my husband could.
I would agree. Sorry.
I really don't believe there was an emphasis on that.
There wasn't. I think we had to go through some unfortunate things for there to be an awareness.
Yeah.
I think families brought some issues to light, as well as how soldiers reacted when they got home. But just sorry, hold on, let me just grab her real quick. Hold on.
I mean, I know that the soldier got block leave after a deployment, but other than that, there was nothing, really organized.
No, nothing. And I remember like James, when he first came home from Iraq at Bliss, that was like the first time that they started like mandating that you stay for a certain amount of days within a certain amount of mileage. And I think like that was the first time that I really saw, especially young wives, young families, young soldiers struggle. It took a lot of like unfortunate things to happen, I feel like, for us to get some type of help and I think the awareness and then awareness went up and stigmas went down. But there that was rough. Guys were coming home, not guys, soldiers were coming home, families were suffering. They're going straight back into the family, not dealing with, and then having to deploy again. Yeah, it was
I also think as the military became more integrated with women, that you saw a gradual shift in more of the, and that may be a coincidence, but I think women brought something to the table more about mental health, and that's, and it was a good thing. As you saw the demographics of the military change, and with more women, that I think that brought about more awareness of mental health. And that's just my, that's just my observation.
I'm a gender historian, so I'm just biased to agree with you there that women definitely, do bring something to the table.
Right.
But Julianne, as somebody who, probably more recently you saw, the additions of these, reintegration training and weekend retreats, like, have you taken advantage of anything like that? Do you think it's helped or had an impact on your marriage as far as like how you communicate with your spouse?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We've definitely, we're, my husband and I both are huge mental health advocates. And I think that, we have taken part in resources, being aware that they're there and that you need them. Yes. And I think that life is hard, marriage is hard, the army makes it even harder. And so if you can grab a tool for your tool belt and go forward, do it. Do it. It takes a lot of creativity to communicate. It takes a lot of grace. It takes an extra type of perspective to kind of move forward in this life. And I think when those resources are there and you can grab them, you should. We'll continue to do so. We'll continue to tell people about it. Yeah. And I feel very grateful that they exist. I will say that.
Yeah.
Do you have any like examples of different things that you've utilized as far as communication techniques?
Sure. We as far as like extra resources or just what we do personally or both?
Both, like how you felt like the military, like how what like resources the military has provided for you, and then stuff you do yourself as well. But
I think that MFLEC and chaplains are incredible. First of all, they're flexible and they have confidentiality. So there's military one source as well when it comes to counseling that I've personally used and during deployments. I was pretty young during our first one and thought I knew it all. Definitely didn't know it all, and I definitely went out and got counseling. Thankful for it. Thankful for not only coverage with TRICARE, first of all, scheduling flexibility, and now you can even get it virtually, which I think is absolutely incredible. I think that our chaplains are an absolute vital resource, not only to families, but to soldiers. Open door policy as well as confidentiality. It's there. You walk in a door. If you need to talk. You don't have to do it every day. You don't have to make it a reoccurring meeting. They're there. And James and I have always done some type of reintegration training. But I will say him and I both are very aware of the struggles of reintegration. And that I learned at Fort Bliss through really, really, really good training before you even got home was, hey, your soldier's about to come home, seen stuff, done stuff. It's not going to look the same. It's not going to be the same. How do you communicate with them? And that was provided through our unit. But that for me, I was not aware of that. I thought he was going to come home and it's just going to be like the day that he left. Was not aware of that until I went through training. And I was like, okay, I need to pull back a little bit and have a little more of an open mind, be a little more patient, show a little more grace. But it was that specific training at Fort Bliss where they're up there telling you like, this is what you should expect. It was truthful, it was real, and they gave us really good tools to communicate back to the soldier. But I remember where I was in that building and I was like, oh, okay. So I don't know it all and it's going to be different. And that was a huge help because like I said, I was young. We were young in our marriage. He was coming home and I was like, oh, it'll just be like when he left. No, not at all. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for that unit and that resource at that time, telling me the truth. It's going to be hard. And when it's hard, here's what you can do. And when it's hard and you need to talk to someone, call to this number. And it just didn't impact me. It was a great resource for all of us. But again, I feel like I don't, I have a lot of gratitude for things like that because of my upbringing and knowing like what my mom went through too, how limited things were, remote, how kind of closed up, like even being in Germany and not even being able to call your mom, my mom being able to her mom.
Yeah.
I can text, social media, call at the drop of the dime. I can be like, you know what, I'm having a bad day, I'm going to call my mom. That didn't exist for her.
Mhm.
So
I
when
got
I
off the phone with my mom before like getting on with you guys. I was like, oh wait, mom, I gotta go. I got something else, and it's amazing.
I can't imagine, because I call my mom probably every day unless someone's traveling or there's something going on. And that's a resource to me. That's a big deal. So yeah, so definitely like I hold gratitude for those things because I know what it was and I know the struggle that's associated when they're not there. And also that there's people trying to make change in a positive direction,
Mhm. Mhm.
advocate for mental health and decrease the stigma. And when that happens, I will go support that. Whether I think I need it or not, I'm going to be in attendance because overall, I think that's a huge direction that we need to go in for families and for soldiers.
So just one follow up, and then one last question, and then I will let you guys go. So Julie, is kind of a follow up to that. She, she was talking about how, when at Bliss, she was forewarned, like, this is going to be hard. Here's how you do this. Like, and, when your husband first went out in 83, or when he went out for, deserts, did anybody before he came back at any time go, this is going to be hard?
No, no. We didn't even, there wasn't even an organized like welcome home ceremony at the hangar. Yeah, I mean, it was, yeah. He just, I somehow got his truck there, but knowing when he was going to be arriving, and I got it there to the parking lot, and then he just showed up at the house. The next, no, there was nothing. No, there was nothing organized. Like I said, we didn't have if we had, I'm sure we had some kind of rear detachment commander, but I mean, nothing.
And do you, like, obviously 38 years of military spousedom, you made it, but do you feel like reintegration is always hard, but like how were those initial moments, or just communication on a whole is, in general?
You mean back then?
Yeah, just back then, and then do you like throughout, but yeah, especially back then, like trying to handle reintegration without anybody being a new,
Right.
Away from your husband for the first time, and
well, like I said, back then it was like a very male dominated culture, and I think spouses at that time, and we didn't want to do anything that might like hurt our husband, hurt our husband's career. And so we just kind of stayed silent, but then gradually as women, even in society, became more of a voice, the culture began to change. And we felt freer to speak out and say, hey, I'm struggling. I need help. Like I know in Hawaii, I had something, very, I was going through a really difficult time. And I needed to seek mental health. And my husband was a commander at the time. He was an 06 brigade commander. And the doctor, the psychiatrist, said to me, we'll bring you through the back door. Like, so nobody will see you in the waiting room, or, so you won't be, or your name won't be called out. And I said, you will not do that. People need to know that, colonels' wives struggle, and are suffering and have issues and problems and need to seek mental health when necessary. And so, but even that was like 90, 98, 99, and there was still that stigma. And then my husband, he was always very, very open to, like, you need help, go get it. And you know, don't try to keep it a secret. You know, he's been very much an advocate for mental health and not trying to cover it up or make it be shameful or that it was going to somehow hurt his career. So, I mean, he was, you know, I think he was always kind of forward thinking, and so, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But, but yes, in 83, 84, you know, with his first long deployment, which 6 months, back then I thought that was forever, but now it doesn't sound like it's that long. But yeah, there was no, you were on your own. You were on your own. The wives, it was basically just social functions. So does that make sense?
Oh, well, unfortunately it makes sense, but yes, no.
Yeah.
And then, you know, just one last question, and is, you know, letters, be it 1978 or when my husband joined in 2014, were the staple of, you know, basic training. Even, you know, even to this day, I think they have an app now. I could be wrong. Yeah, they do. But I think they still, the app is still used to, like, you know, here's my address to send the letter. So do you still ever write letters back and forth when they're apart, or do you have any, do you have the letters from those times?
I have letters. I had a mother-in-law that saved everything. She's deceased now, but when my husband went to Korea for a year in 91 to 92, I mean, she saved all his I mean, he wrote her every week. He called us. We got a phone call. The kids and I, we didn't, you know, this was an unaccompanied tour. The kids and I got a phone call every Saturday. But it wasn't a long phone call because that was, you know, money, you know, that costs money. But he write his mother a letter every week, and she saved them all. I have all those. I have, yeah, letter writing, postcard. I mean, she saved all the letters and postcards, and my mother saved everything that I wrote her, you know, from Germany. So yeah, I just, and it makes me kind of sad that the art of letter writing is probably gone by the wayside. You know, because now it's just, you know, just quick little text or, you know, but letters are sweet. And I'm glad I saved them, and I'm glad my mother-in-law held on to them as well. Mm-hmm.
I will say James's first deployment, we were on the, sorry, she's a little fussy. We were on the end of that. So like he didn't have a computer in his room. He would go to like I'm sorry, the like a tent. And we, so you had to communicate like when you were going to call, and that was one of those phone calls that was like backlogged kind of. Those are fun.
Where they stood in line.
Yeah, they stood in line to call. So I did, that was probably, I did save all those. Those were more like email fashion, but since you couldn't guarantee a phone call, that was like 2007. You definitely were probably more apt to like write it out, and because the phone calls weren't even that I don't know, they were so different. They'd call from when they could after being in line, and there's always like a delay, so it wasn't even very like effective communication. So you could almost get more out in an email fashion. And I did print all those out, and I saved those in a binder. Now after that, technology just went rapid and advanced. And I do think that we stopped doing that. It was, I mean, you can even like shoot them a text now when they're deployed. I'm like, so it did replace that. I'm thankful that at the very end we got like a taste of it, because I do think it's very it's a good form of communication. You've got to sit there, think it out. You're grateful. You've got to utilize your time. And now we're just so, we can fire a text, shoot something on social media. It's quick, it's instant. And before there was more thought to it. So, but I printed all those out and I have them. Oh, I know, we're almost done. Hold on.
So thank you both so much.